Now I'm living at Keith's house. Episode 1. Keith is a sucker for antiques. Now we will see one of his first buys from an auction that he went to in his lunch break way back in 1969. But in the meantime, this electric heater is a lovely little throwback from the 1930s. And may I just add, still works, and thank goodness, because I was used to central heating in my flat, and this was a lovely little godsend through those cold winter months at Keith's house. There is a similar one swinging on a very frayed wire in his bathroom. What was made in Italy, sat in Clapham, London, and is supportive of Keith's backside at Grace Gardens? Well, he tells me. Classic piece, beautifully made, lasts a lifetime. I'm always going to keep them. One of Doug and Maisie's most expensive home purchases, 2 Italian-made chairs, recovered at least every decade since the 1950s. Here is an unfinished sketch I found from around 1965, and there are the very 2 chairs. Being a great preserver of items where his backside resides, Keith also salvaged this settee via the skip from his boss's foyer in Bishop's Stortford. Here is the lounge looking toward the back garden in the early 60s, Greg's paintings on the wall, and some Encyclopaedia Britannicas underneath. But by the end of the 60s, things had changed, and Doug built shelves and cupboards on this wall, not because of some impending style, but as Keith puts it so well, we had a lot of stuff by the end of the 60s. All those books, and there's more upstairs, thousands in the attic. Over the time I've known Keith, I've spent many a night with a glass of wine in his lounge, listening to Keith's jazz collection, talking about the arts, and then going home with an armful of books that I was supposed to read. And now I'm actually living at Keith's house. It's great. Look, he's even got a Russian chess clock, used by the great masters in Moscow in the 1950s. You know how it works, don't you? The guy on the left has managed his moves in about 2 hours, and one on the right, he's dragging his heels with well over 5 hours for his moves. 7 hours. Can you imagine the excitement that audience went through? No, me either. But the clock is fantastic to look at. So what tickles your fancy here then? Well, first of all, it's these encyclopedias. Trust me on this. These volumes date back to 1902. Keith's dad acquired them after the Second World War. He swapped his battle dress with a friend for the complete Encyclopaedia Britannica. This 1902 10th edition, at the time, constituted an authoritative reference library of every aspect of human knowledge. In Keith's bedroom, you will see a picture taken in the early 40s of Doug and Maisie on their wedding day. Doug is wearing the very battle dress he swapped. So, was swapping his battle dress for the 40-odd leather-bound volumes of every aspect of human knowledge worthwhile? For Doug, who knows? For Keith, you better believe it. The well-fingered Volume 1, A&A, is where anatomy lives. Yes, at the age of 11, this is where Keith started to learn all about his body parts. Keith admits, that was one of the greatest thrills of my early years, to spend many an evening looking at the anatomy pages. I found it fascinating. The explicit engravings really intrigued me. It was powerful stuff. As some of the descriptive texts had been written from the 1880s, the authors presumed you knew Latin and Greek and dropped it mid-sentence on many occasions. Oh yes, this was all bachelor building stuff for Keith. Moving around the shelves and cupboards, we come across Maisie's sewing and embroidery cubbyhole, untouched, just how she'd left it before she died. World Records presents the very best of Bing, and best played on Keith's trusty Rotel turntable. Goodbye Baby and Amen, Photographer David Bailey gives us a commentary on the 60s in this original copy. Heydays of the 60s contained here. Got to be worth a few bob, don't you think, Rich? Keith asked. I shrugged my shoulders. I'm still wondering who the hell is Bing. I'm sorry, I haven't a clue. Hancock's Half Hour. Red Dwarf. A further revelation into Keith's interests. This tape deck remained powered up and poised with the French tape all the time I lived at Keith's house, and probably is still ready today to play and dispense its lesson. Well, we've all heard of Nam, seen Don McCullum's chilling images of shell-shocked soldiers. Very disturbing. Just as disturbing is Dagenham, East London. But when these records were pressed, it was probably a very decent place, even called the countryside by the Cockneys who moved there. For a bit of fun, I'll get out the old wind-up record player, crank it up, and play Dad's old 78s. Ah, good old Doug and Maisie. They ensured their two boys were well educated in the arts. Here's more evidence of that with the official guide to the Tate Gallery, 25p, sitting sandwiched between such exciting books like English Villages, 1530 to 1830 architecture. Who knows how long the official guide to the Tate Gallery was there? 25p. Before we leave Keith's Lounge, we have one more treat on these bookshelves. Doug's main source magazine from the 60s and 70s. As Keith had led his dad down in the cricket field, Doug hoped his son would follow his footsteps into architecture. But no, Keith was drawn to graphic design. Maybe it started with those explicit drawings of body parts in Volume 1 that Keith examined so earnestly. But maybe one of Doug's own design magazines, from the Council of Industrial Design, cemented Keith's future. But which issue? Maybe it was this one, number 260, August 1970, 5 shillings, which could be very expensive or really cheap, I'm not sure. It is a special edition for the British Graphic Design Awards. This was avant-garde stuff, Keith recalls, the holy grail to us designers. Within the pages of this 1970s award issue are illustrations of the Beatles and Led Zeppelin album covers, and inside a full-colour pull-out for British plastics. At the time, the photographer Earl of Snowdon, who was married to Princess Margaret, was an editorial advisor for the magazine. All cutting-edge stuff. This graphic design sums up the 70s, and it seems they had sussed it right at the beginning of that decade. On that incredibly high note, it's time to leave Keith's Lounge and to explore the kitchen, which has the only source of hot water for this house. Also, the only place to dry your undies. Plus, hold on to your horses, the pottery, which has a curtained toilet. End of episode 1.